record. Right. Hi everyone, welcome to Agile Expertise. Today we've got a very different format, which is the Lean Coffee format. We have done one before, but I personally have never hosted one. So it's my first time, and always nervous as ever when it comes to working on these things for the first time round. I'd like to introduce you to our panel guests, which is Giles, Lindsay, and Rishita. Rishita and I used to work together at a company. This is like many moons ago now. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Rishita?
Long time.
Yes. And basically, Rishita has been working in HR for as long as I know. So I'm going to actually replace HR with people management. Is that better? Is that a better term to use? Or
Yes,
I think
please.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And all resources were people.
Well, yeah. Yeah. People team. Yeah, absolutely.
And in the last 5 years, Rishita's been introduced to Agile within the HR space. And as a result of that, she's very passionate about putting the human element back into the actual recruitment process, I guess. That's pretty much what Rishita does. And then I'd like to introduce you to Giles. Giles is an enterprise coach. He's also a colleague who has been working with me on several projects, many community-based projects as well, which is all about giving back knowledge in the Agile space so that we can actually help get you guys learning a little bit more about what Agile means, what it could do for you, and giving you little takeaways of bits and bobs that we can offer you. So I've got huge support from Giles at the moment, and I'm super excited to get your questions asked. So the way I thought I'd give it, how do we try this? Okay, we have a Jamboard. We have a few questions on the Jamboard. Have you guys had a look at that yet?
Yeah, I have done.
Okay. Any contributions?
Well, no, I think one of them perfectly captures my point where I'm recently certified. It's a CSM, so
okay, cool.
I'm fine with all of them.
Okay, so the way we'll do it is we'll put 10-minute timer against each question, and then we'll literally throw it out to the floor. So my idea is not to have it so that just the three of us are talking. We really want you guys to get engaged as well, get involved, and tell us a little bit about your experiences as well. So yeah, here we go. So I'm going to pull up the first question, and I'm going to set the timer quickly, so bear with me. Timer, clock. Timer, 10 minutes. You can tell it's my first time now, can't you? Okay, so the first question is, and I think, Brianna, this was your question, wasn't it? So if my organization is reverting back to Waterfall after an attempt at Agile, should I quit my job?
Wow. That's so we kind of preceded some of these questions, Sheetal and I, yesterday, having a look at the ones that had been put up there. So we both enjoyed this question. And look, after we spoke Monday as well, we had a great call with you and your colleagues. For me, I was going to say no, right? I mean, the obvious answer is simply no, because especially if it's Brianna, you've got to be the one, championing the fact as to why are they reverting? What's going on in the organization? What's that organizational friction that's actually causing that revert back? Now, I've been through that. Okay, I've actually, I've been kicked out of a job because that organization didn't want, as we discussed, didn't want to have that Agile adoption ultimately at the end of the day, and got rid of everybody, all the Agile leadership, and kind of went back to that old school, very old school PMO, not the new PMO, but the old school PMO, waterfall approach to delivery, etc., etc. I would say no, and I think Sheetal and I both agreed that the answer to this question, no, obviously, because we need those champions out there, those Agile leaders that we talk about. And as I've said, you don't hire Agile leaders. There are just those Agile leaders that exist within the organizations that have that mindset, understand the philosophy and set of values, and that sort of trying to get that new way of working and to continue championing it. If you're going back to Waterfall, you still need to remove the friction and process within the organization, right? You still need to understand why there is that change happening. And if you've got to be, I suppose, a change champion, for that the reversion back to waterfall. You still need to be still saying, okay, well, there's smarter ways of doing things than potentially the traditional ways of doing waterfall. And you may have some of that philosophy and mindset approach from having done Agile, even in a waterfall world, to bring about some of that smartness, to bring about removing some of that waste in process as well. And so the answer is no, don't ever quit. I mean, you know, we need you leading and championing the change, especially at Cisco. Go Cisco.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I've heard about Cisco.
Yeah. So I should clarify, this is not actually an autobiographical question. This question stems from actually watching others go through this and
Gotcha.
very hierarchical legacy organizations. I haven't quit my job. I don't intend to quit Cisco anytime soon. But I have seen other organizations, and this usually happens through acquisitions. You know, the organization, it's a small startup or someone who's very, very lean and has mastered whatever they're great at, right? But then they get acquired by a much larger organization. And I have actually seen very phenomenal performers who would take a pay cut, 50% of their pay, to go to another Agile organization rather than stay with whatever bureaucracy they were going to have to buy into. And for them, that was the right call. So as I should probably clarify, this isn't necessarily me we're talking about, but this
I presumed it wasn't, but I presumed it was probably a leading question.
It is very much a leading question.
Yeah. And the answer is no, because I mean, you know, if you're passionate about doing the job where you are, and you aren't in that position where you can go to the other company even for a 50% pay cut or whatever that is, you still want to remove as much friction in that organizational agility as possible, right? So whatever you've learned from being that awesome Agile leader, wherever you are in that role in that organization, you should still be there doing something amazing with it.
Yeah. Rishita, would you like to add something to that?
From my perspective, you know, in terms of coming from a HR environment and trying to bring in so from my perspective, from a HR perspective, what we're trying to bring in really to organizations is the mindset that comes along with, you know, the working in an Agile way. And I faced sort of that, you know, that pushback or that sort of lack of understanding from working in an Agile way, that sort of iterative incremental approach. Because in HR, typically we work very waterfall approach as well. It's very similar. You know, we design things at the top, whether it's a system implementations or a policy implementation or a process implementation. You know, we design it, you know, from a HR perspective at our level behind, you know, closed doors, and sort of deliver and push this out without really seeking feedback, understanding if that's what, you know, our employees want, without knowing what support they need. So it's been a bit of a struggle, actually, sort of being understood, and actually, I realized that the best way for me was not sort of go out with an all bang approach and say, okay, we need to change in entirety. It's about bringing in my way, what are the things that I can bring into my span of control and scope, and really show the different ways in which, you know, it is beneficial to work in an Agile way within HR, and then how we support leaders also, and our processes, how they can all be supported and fitted together. So I think I agree with Giles in the way that you said it, and the fact that sometimes we need to look at, you know, what is it that we can control and bring that into that, because then eventually it will roll out. And
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two sides to this coin, though, isn't there? So you've got the extreme side where you actually find yourself at a point where you're absolutely, you know, unhappy with the fact that this company has taken the Agile route away and decided to enforce the waterfall world back in, maybe, or, you know, they've got rolled back to natural ways of working. And so in some instances, I hate to say it, but quitting your job might be the right thing, right? But I've been in a situation exactly like this, where you're talking a good few years ago now. I was actually working for an organization, I'm not mentioning any names here, but yeah, so I was working in this organization, and actually they claimed to be Agile, but they were not in any way, shape or form. They were everything but. Very command and control, very organization, everything was planning. And what I did, I was the only one in that entire office space, in that entire floor, that had my own whiteboard, my own Post-its, my own Sharpies. So I kept persevering and introducing Agile despite the fact that they didn't like it. Now, there was a point where we were in the boardroom meetings, and in that boardroom, I literally pasted the whole wall with retrospective feedback. And we had somebody walk in to the actual boardroom and say, you need to take all that down because it's really unprofessional. And we did. We're like, okay, we'll do as we're told. But then the only thing we did differently was we took the posters down from that room, but we moved it to another room. Perseverance in agile ways of working and actually proving that it is the right approach is a difficult feat to achieve. But when you do show the outcomes, and sometimes you have to shout really loud about it and really make a scene, it's okay. As long as you can prove that it's working and you're getting the results that you feel that you need, there's really no point in quitting your job. Because at the end of the day, these managers, they're not really bothered about the how we do the work, they're bothered about the outcomes. As long as you're getting the outcomes that they want, I think you're in a good space.
I have a bit of a question about that. You raised an important point there. So long as they're getting the outcomes that they need, and one of the questions I would pose, if you pick, I've been trying to compare what I do with software development with other industries. So I was looking at really big companies that are successful in the UK.
Yeah.
So I looked at GlaxoSmithKline and I looked at Rolls-Royce, really big technical domains that are scary, complicated, and massive, and world class in their own right. And I sort of looked at them. And the sort of thought exercise I've got is, if you said that Rolls-Royce were designing fantastic engines like they do, if they started to go wrong today, if they started to hack stuff in, and well, there's a 0.25% chance this might go wrong in some specific, very unlikely event. If they started to mess with it today, there's a sort of lead time. So I think different people it will affect different people in the organization at different times.
Yeah.
It's like if standards begin to slide manufacturing engines today, the people that make the engines, that the some special metallurgist might know today, and some manager will know, some marketing manager will know in 2 or 3 or 4 years time. And it depends where you are in that process, I think. So it'll affect some people far more than others.
Oh, yeah, there's always an impact somewhere along the chain, and that's why there are certain things you should be doing at the organizational level to ensure that what you are doing is connected, and this is where the whole dependency thing comes in. So Giles, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just thinking back to the fact that you're talking about those large organizations with technical challenges and everything else. And I'm a software engineer. And look at Elon Musk with SpaceX, right? I mean, he actually went through the challenges of doing the whole Tesla model and the entire sort of, following the moniker of fail fast, succeed faster, and ended up created... I got 30 seconds. Ultimately, right, they iterated, inspected, and adapted at SpaceX based on some of the failures that they learned through the Tesla model. And those were the things that they actually took in. I mean, removing roles, removing hierarchies, especially in SpaceX as well. Actually bringing that agile mindset in, that set of philosophies in, as to how can we remove waste in process, how can we receive the feedback quicker as well, and they actually brought that in. Yet they didn't stop or scrimp on the actual technical things that actually allow a human being to go into space, stay alive, and come back to Earth. And that is the key message there, is that they made sure that the things which actually are needing the quality elements to get a human in space and bring him back still alive, or her bring back alive, wasn't scrimped or on, but they still did it in getting a rocket into space and landing vertically as well in under the time that he had actually set and told the market and everything else. So technical challenges aside, you can still bring that philosophy and mindset into the workplace.
Thanks, Giles. Rishita, what do you think?
Yeah, I nothing to add. I think Giles summarized it quite well.
Yeah. So just a quick one, David, to add to that, GSK, ironically, have been probably a very heavy, cumbersome kind of big, chunky organization. However, they do research. They're very well known for doing research. And that's also part of the Agile strategy. So actually, technically, they've been doing Agile without really knowing that they've been Agile.
But the research projects are very different from the making products.
Yeah, and they've struggled. GSK is a good example where they have actually, the mindset shift has been a difficult job and task to achieve. But they've done really well. They are going through a transformation at the moment, and they've got the best thing about them. They've got the buy-in from their CEO, and because they've got that buy-in at the highest level, they're going for it. So there's good news in the pipeline somewhere there.
Okay. The reason I raised that is I remember working for a quite well-known government department that everyone deals with, and I was leading one particular team there, and I got into the lift with the boss of my boss, and he's talking about, he doesn't know who I am, but he's talking about my project.
Oh, wow.
That's, you get the sinking feeling when he's describing my project to someone else, and you realize he has no clue what's going on. And he's described all good stuff is bad and all the bad stuff is good, and no one in my project has he spoken to ever.
Right, yeah.
You realize that if stuff went wrong today, how many months or weeks would it take? The feedback is not happening. In a decent organization that takes Agile and feedback and all this stuff reasonably, you might expect to see somebody like that every week or every month.
You would, absolutely.
At some level.
Yeah, it's very true, and it's very important. It's I mean, the way I used to do that is just put them in my calendar, invite them to the demonstration, so they've got visibility, and just.
It would have been nice if you knew who we were, even, to say hello or something.
That's a sad indictment, though, of that sort of traditionalist bureaucratic leadership. And again, if anyone saw the talk the other week I don't call them leadership, right? I call them management, because I have a differentiator between the word leadership and what a leader is and what that leader aspires to do and how they behave in an organization, as opposed to a manager who's just simply, doing the sell rather than a leader who's doing the tell. And that's that major differentiator. So if you've got leaders in your organization, I really think that they should be caring about you, who you are, what your teams are, know more about what you're aspiring to achieve, the business outcomes you're working towards, etc., etc. A manager who's detached and remote from that, executive or otherwise, I still give them that same management title, it's never going to have that necessarily that buy-in. They're so far up the corporate ladder, they're removed from everything else, the voice of the customer, everybody. They just don't have a clue what's going on.
Yeah. Right, I'm just looking at the time. We've covered one question and it's almost 7 o'clock already. We'll move on to the next one. And actually, I really like this question. I don't know, I believe the person who asked the question is not in the room because they actually changed their RSVP. But that question is, what role does UX research play in an Agile setting? Giles, Rishita, either.
I don't mind going first on this one, again, only because we very kindly had a great conversation about this yesterday. We think, I had a conversation with somebody today on a QA research position as well on this. These people should be invited to the table right at the start of an ideation process, right? The UX research, understanding what the voice of the customer actually wants, designing an outcome which is actually fit for the customer to consume, so that you're not building one of those old waterfall systems. The customer wants a red box, but somehow 9 months later you've built them an orange triangle. It's kind of similarish color, it's a shape, but it's not actually what the customer wants, right? The UX research genuinely helps in that inception phase of a product or a product delivery setting to help identify right up front the things that are going to go off and delight the customer and the things that are going to go and piss off the customer. And so I think, getting that person to play that role, a product insight setting, getting them to actually, iterate and ideate certain ideas with customer in insight sessions as well, right at that inception of a project or product is absolutely key. And I think this is exactly what you were leading on to as well, Sheetal, yesterday.
Yeah, Absolutely. Rishita, what do UX research job specs look like today? Are there any differences between the two?
That's a good show.
You see these?
Yeah, well, to be honest, from our perspective, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how I can answer this question from that perspective, from a UX perspective in terms of what it looks like. But I think in terms of, how user experience plays a role within organizations and how HR can enable this is really important. So from recruitment through to, engagement, retention, performance development, management, through exit, we tend to create these processes and systems, again, without really taking into account what our employees or our users are looking for, and without taking into account what the experience looks like. We're moving away, from management and development, from career, from point on point to experience. And HR is really now taking a lot of notice about providing a meaningful experience to employees when it comes to each of the processes that they go through, from onboarding through to leadership development and management. And I agree with what Giles said earlier about differentiation between leadership and management is really, really true, especially from perspective of moving towards a more human-centered organization. Managers are there to manage systems, whereas leaders are there to actually enable our teams to operate, with better productivity, higher engagement, and more loyalty. So it's about fostering an environment of trust, transparency, and free flow of information, and that's what we're seeing happening, at least in a lot of organizations who are embracing Agile within HR. And so how HR can actually help organizations become more agile, because our processes and systems can be a blocker to that. So we have to bring this synergy, basically.
Yeah, it's almost show them how it's done, more or less, isn't it? So
yeah, because you got to practice what you preach. If you're trying from a software or IT perspective, you're trying to work in a certain way, but your goals are individual, whereas you work in a team. That your performance review is based on individual perspective, whereas you work again as a team. Your reward is individual, whereas you work as a team. Exactly. So how do your processes? There's a culture structure misfit there, and it starts creating a bit of tension. So it's important that HR really comes on board and starts to understand how our processes and how our systems and policies can actually support this way of working. So it's really bringing the mindset and the philosophy into it.
Yeah, that's great. And there's an interesting one. There's one organization who, and again, I'm trying not to mention names here, but there's one organization that rewards teams instead of individuals. And I thought that was a really great way to motivate productivity and delivery of the work that needed to be done. But I think from the way I look at it is that the UX research role has actually changed, and actually it's a relatively new position now as well. I think it's gone from doing user research in terms of computer interactions to actual human interactions, which is quite ironic, because I think the whole concept of user research probably came from human interactions to begin with, and then it sort of got skewed up and then became, how do we deliver for the user from the business perspective, not the actual user perspective. So I think the actual role of the user researcher has really changed, and it's now become an integral part of an agile team. And I really believe that the user researcher is the person that's actually got more and can get more details in terms of understanding that voice of the customer, and can support the product owner from that perspective. They can support the business analyst from that perspective. They can support the developer from this perspective, and the designers. So there's a whole new responsibility that comes in with user researchers. And it's not just around interface design anymore. It's about how are people using the interfaces? What does that look like? What do the actual customers do? Where do they look on their interfaces? If we're going to look at the digital side, that's the kind of thinking they need to be more mindful of. So I think it's a whole new art. It's an art form, really, to actually be a good user UX researcher, user experience researcher.
I worry that the question being up there on the page, though, says the person who created the question isn't feeling like, as a UX researcher, engineer, they're actually sitting as part of an agile community or an agile team, and are trying to work and understand, how do I get that seat at the table? How do I do that? How do I enable that in a better setting? I presume again it's a leading question, so I just worry. It's a shame the person's not here to sort of have that dialogue with us.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, good.
Can I just add a little bit? So obviously, without knowing a little bit more about what they're referring to, if the UX role is part of a cross-functional team, they're self-organizing, they don't have specialist roles, they generalize, they can backfill for one another. Certainly, from a customer perspective, if they're able to bring to the table and add value from a customer experience, then their role is equally as important as other people in the team, whatever form of Agile framework they're adopting. So to overemphasize or underemphasize any specific role player from a functional point of view in an Agile team is actually doing them disservice. And in this true spirit of Agile, UX researcher is not one that they can say, oh yeah, we need that person because we need someone to find out what the user experience is. It should be looked at from the totalitarian point of view, the end value from the customer perspective. The customer doesn't care about code because they don't see code. They don't see a scrum master, they don't see a coach. They just see value. So it's important for the organization to actually develop the mindset. And this is where I'm going with my point of view. It's all about the mindset rather than the framework, rather than how the team is composed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
How the organization perceives of the individuals or the people in the team, and how does that team deliver value? That's what I'm.
I agree, but I still worry. The question there is kind of saying this person is not even involved in a team or a cross-functional community with that mindset and those set of the philosophy, etc., etc. So the question I don't think would have been there otherwise for us to try and have a crack at answering.
It is quite interesting to know how they got to be in the team.
Yeah.
Well, whenever they got a job, they were assigned to the team. So how can they not be part of the setting? So we just need to understand a little bit more about what their intent is before, we can guide.
Yeah, I think at this point we kind of look at the question and kind of assume that it might be the case that there's no clarity around what their particular contribution might be or what their role actually should look like. And yes, actually, just to go back and reiterate, it's an integral part because it's all about understanding the end user, which is who your buyer is going to be. So, right, I think we've got 15 seconds left. Are we happy to move on to the next question? Yeah. Okay, so I might follow Christina's lead and go down the route of the question. Where was it? I have recently been certified for CSM, but what now? Rishita, should we start with you?
Probably best one for Giles, actually, because it's more of a probably, how do I get into, the world of work as a Scrum Master as opposed to me? I guess Giles is the best placed here.
Look, it's funny, right? Because I did my CSM very early on. And as I discussed after the last meetup, I've jokingly sort of said, I wish it wasn't called Scrum Master anymore. The idea, yes, right. The idea that somehow you go and do 3 days training somewhere, possibly you could call it coaching, but it's training to a large part of it. And the fact that after those 3 days, you come away with this moniker, this title, master at the end of it. For me, it should be exactly like David's recoiling in horror.
Yeah, certified beginner would be a lot more honest.
Precisely, right? Yes, certified Scrum beginner. Certified Scrum, junior, qualified, whatever that is.
No one would turn up and pay if they didn't have the M word. That's the thing.
But I think then the question is, but what now? I've got that qualification. What now? genuinely, you know, I think if they're becoming that Scrum Master, Scrum evangelist, shall we say, within an organization, there's a want or a need for that person to be in that role. Okay, so there's obviously some catalyst which is asked for them to go and be a CSM. They might have done it off their own volition. They might now be kind of going, I want to work in an agile organization, right? So therefore, from the HR perspective, I know I'll get Rishita to sort of talk about it from that perspective. But for me, it's about then trying to find that organization where you can then go on that journey, because I did. I joined an organization that was going through that catalyst of change, which wanted those Scrum Masters, which had those coaches and other people in the organization that I could aspire and learn from. And that was the what now for me. I went and actually actively found a company that wanted somebody with the things that I'd learned, the new strings to the bow that I now had, and could actually put them into practice and actually allow me to develop and learn, so that over a number of years, I could actually probably aspire to be the M in the CSM, which I acquired, I don't know, back in 2005 or something crazy. So the part of that is that I would probably say, I wouldn't even necessarily say I was an M now, you know, all of these years, you know, 15 years later. But I think the fact that I bring the right sort of aptitude and the right mindset to the teams that I'm operating with, and they are truly cross-functional, and we do allow the teams to choose those ways of working. I think it's just finding a company who will take you on a journey, who will help you evolve as a person within that organization, allow you to use what you learn. And obviously, if you want to then evolve it and go from, I think, which is another one question, how do we then become a coach? I think then, you know, you can get onto those, you can be mentored, you can have all that support from the new leaders in an organization who operate in a different way, and, get you to ultimately become that true CSM.
Thanks, Giles. Rishita.
I think what I'll say from my side, even though I didn't write the question, so from my perspective, I'm looking at Scrum as more of a journey for myself. So it's not the case for me that I kind of go, okay, I've done my certification and that's it. I have, had a long career in terms of from telco all the way through. And I've been, worked on projects, done that. And I mean, from my perspective, in terms of I've done my CSM certificate, and then my commitment to going to meetups and kind of building a framework for myself of what I think a good Scrum Master is in my mind, and knowing, okay, if I do facilitation, it looks like this, and I kind of figure out what works for me and what doesn't. I think it's just a question of, okay, so I look on roles and I see CSM roles and project PM roles that are there. So I'm kind of like widening the net of keeping everything open, because when I read the CSM roles, I don't get the sense that they're HR people who actually know what they're putting in there. It's just kind of like, oh, we just put everything in there, that's Scrum. And in terms of going, hey, I can really find a specific company by looking on ads that says this company really is like at the heart of on an agile journey. Some of them just kind of seem like a checkbox when you read the Scrum Master roles. So that makes it even harder for you when you are starting to kind of go, okay, I'm applying to loads of different stuff. You don't necessarily hear anything. And that's just based on the premise of how the role is written. So I completely understand the part that I'm on a journey for myself to kind of go, do I want to stay on this agile path? I mean, I've done Lean certification, and I find Scrum to be, kind of more on the journey of maybe moving towards coaching and facilitating. But that's just my personal journey. But in terms of if you want to get a role, I find it really hard to specifically find that company when what you're looking at job boards and you don't really see that, okay, the HR recruitment, they know what they're doing, or they're just following a checklist. That's kind of what I've seen so far.
When you apply for Scrum Master jobs, I wonder, are there very different expectations of what people want? And maybe there are 3 or 4 different
Yeah.
versions of what a Scrum Master, and there may be horribly messed up perceptions of what they want to hire a Scrum Master to do, but it'd be interesting to if somebody was to survey that and see how those those role advertisements would break out, what the different expectations are.
I think you're right, because I think people mix up some of these things. I saw a job advert the other day, and it was for a director of engineering type role, and of course it sort of said has knowledge of Scrum or something. I mean, it was really so wishy-washy in how it was advertising the role, and it clearly is, you know, it needs a Rishita to be in that organisation to actually, you know, come from it from a people management perspective rather than a human resources perspective, right? And for me, I've seen a mixture where you get project management roles, which then mention Scrum. You get, right, and then you get delivery management roles, which mention Scrum. And you get, I don't know, some sort of senior business analyst role, which kind of mentions Scrum, as if somehow the Scrum Master isn't actually a role in its own right that it should be, and have that, you know, that leadership, agile leader role within the organization. It has to be, you have to be in another role, and oh my God, if you've got a Scrum Master qualification that can actually support it and augment it, I mean, otherwise, where's the qualification called the, you know, Scrum Master Project Manager or Scrum Master Business Analyst, right? Or the Scrum Master whatever, you know. The point being is, it's not, it's a certified Scrum Master. Therefore, let's not get it all mixed up with in a modicum of other roles, and you should also have a Scrum Master qualification. It should be, no, we're hiring for a Scrum Master, or we're hiring for a whatever coach, or we're hiring for a lean practitioner. Whatever is the thing, let's get it right, so that, you know, the people management part of the organization can actually create job specs and other things to hire those people who aspire to Christina's point, enjoying her glass of wine, can actually, you know, go on that journey and have that career.
I couldn't support what both David, Christina, and Giles have said there. It's becoming more of a comedy show. What's happening out there in the employment market, it's absolutely pathetic. Just coming back to this issue about the title of the Master in Scrummery, I think it would be fair to say that when the title came about many years ago, they had no idea that it was going to cause so much division and confusion. In my opinion, the Master in Scrum and CSM doesn't actually refer to your level of expertise.
There was quite a lot of controversy amongst
on LinkedIn.
The signatories of the Agile Manifesto actually disagreed about the use of the word master.
Right. Okay, I'm not surprised. But just coming back to, there is a specific reason why for Scrum Mastery, there are actually 3 designated levels with the Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org. You've got the Scrum Master, Advanced Scrum Master, and Certified Scrum Professional. There's a reason why they've done that. Now, I've got to CSBSM, which I acquired recently, and I would not even advocate to have the level of expertise where I would say I'm now a master, because it's just a starting point.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending journey.
Yes.
And I will never get to the point where I'm going to classify myself as an expert, because we're dealing with organizations, we're dealing with people, and there's daily evolution. After my Scrum Professional, I've had to embark on a specific coach journey. So it's ongoing and it's never ending.
So I think we should keep going with this one, because it's a really interesting conversation that's happening. Rishita, did you have something to say in terms of like people getting their certifications and then not knowing what to do with that going forward?
No, I mean, I think, you know, I definitely agree with the fact that, you know, sort of these job titles do bring a bit of confusion, and for organizations who are more traditionally focused, perhaps, they don't really understand what the role of a Scrum Master is, and typically tends to be confused with project management, exactly what Giles was saying, and then they throw in things like, you know, from experience or understanding, etc. So it is a difficult one, and I think there's a lot that you know, HR departments need to do. They need to really understand there are 2 types of Agile. There's Agile for HR and there's HR for Agile, and we have to be able to bring these 2 together. So it's not just important for us to understand the philosophy and the mindset that is required, but also what are the tools, the processes, and that sort of come together as part of this philosophy and mindset, and really understanding the differences between them. It's education, and it involves really a lot of education, but also working with with businesses and management to do that. Sometimes I wonder how often they're just told, we need to, this is what we need, and these are the skills that we need, and they're kind of left alone to put a spec together, and it doesn't really meet the requirements of that organization. So it's yeah, Christina, it's a hard one here, to be honest, and it requires also a bit of courage and vulnerability from HR to say, I don't understand what you mean, I don't know what a Scrum Master is, so explain. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done also to come from a place of vulnerability. HR needs to be able to put their hand up and say, I don't get it,
Yeah.
And I think that we've potentially missed a trick there as well, right? Especially if we're the people in those technology leadership positions who are hiring. If we've actually messed up because we haven't done a good enough job to actually work with our partners in the people management teams to make sure that job specifications and job roles are that well identified, especially if you do have agile leaders within the organizations who know what they should be aspiring to hire. I've made that mistake in my career. I've gone and done the whole delivery management piece as well at some point, only to sort of realize probably 12 months down the line that actually I should have just hired agile coaches. And my role should have been, right, I want to hire agile coaches, not something with specifically management. Whether you've got lean, practice qualifications, Scrum Master qualifications, you're the type of person that I want to come in to actually be those agile leaders in the organization and bring about that philosophical change within the organization. And I think I would have done a lot better had I actually sort of cottoned onto that a lot earlier. I now know to do it. I certainly won't be asking for project managers or delivery managers with a CSM qualification. If need be, I'll be actually asking, I want a CSM instead.
I also wonder that, from a perspective of HR also is, and also bringing in Agile into our recruitment practices. I think it needs to move away from recruitment as a department or a separate function. The hiring of team members needs to go back into the team and needs to belong with that team and with that leader. That's where recruitment should belong, not with a separate function who actually doesn't understand, because very often HR doesn't understand the business as well as it should, doesn't know the intricacies, the nuances, doesn't know the interdependencies, right? So yes, can we support, perhaps can we better support with the actual process, maybe of advertising or helping with certain things, the administrative part of it, but actually the actual recruitment and the hiring should belong with teams and should belong with leaders, and this is where I think
that's really, really powerful thing you've just said there. And actually, the description should come from the team and then be supported by HR from that perspective. What I wanted to say as well, Femi, Christina, congratulations for actually going down that path and actually getting yourself certified. You guys are entering and congratulations anyone else who has as well. But you're entering a really saturated space. There's a lot of people with certifications out there. So with that in mind, I would probably, Christina, you're really taking a good route here. You're doing things to keep yourself on top of the game. You're attending meetups and you're kind of creating and gathering that knowledge. And what I'd probably be inclined to say to all of you is that, get on your CVs and say, this is not a project manager, I am not a project manager, I am not a product owner, I am not a delivery manager, I am a Scrum Master, and this is my role. That's one thing. I would even literally make it very explicit on your CV if you have to. The other thing I would say is that you have to stand out. And I've been in I'll give you an example where I was mentoring a developer who had just become a certified Scrum Master. I'll be very quick. And basically, he couldn't find work purely because he'd just certified. And I think that's the case for many certified Scrum Masters who have just embarked from a transition, who have just transitioned from development to, Scrum Master or whatever that role might be. And the best place to potentially start, and if you're willing to have a go at it, is go to startups. Go and find a startup and say, hey, can I just practice my CSM with you? I want to practice and get that experience. Find ways to get the experience. Start a little project of your own even, and start putting your work to practice. because nothing beats experience. You may have the certifications, but at the end of the day, having the experience is what's really going to get you forward, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Could I know the buzzer went off. Can I share a few quick thoughts too?
Oh, yeah, okay, let me have a look. One in blue?
Say it again.
What are we looking at? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking if I could share some comments. Christine's already heard them, but I'm going to share with the group. So the recommendation I have is your network is your best asset. Okay. I had 3 titles in 4 months. I went from project manager, iteration manager to scrum master, same job, 3 different titles, and I don't even know what an iteration manager is, but it was sort of a blend between what project management, they didn't want to call it project management, they didn't want to call it agile, so they gave it this strange title. It doesn't matter what the title is, it doesn't matter what the job description is. You need to be making friends with people who have these jobs and know what they're doing, going to the meetups and meeting people and asking questions. I've said this before, meet someone who's doing this job and ask if you can shadow them. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't let you. Because when they need someone, they know who to go to. Just this year, at the beginning of the year, there was a position that opened up in my organization for a Scrum Master. People who applied who were qualified, but the director came to me and said, do you know people? And I said, yes, none of them have ever done this. They don't have the credential, but these are the people you want in this role. And I will go out and make my way to make sure that they are qualified and do what you need. I'm overwhelmed, but I'm going to make sure they succeed. You will find people who will help you. Be okay with reaching out to people. Not everyone wants to help, and they're not always available to help, but there are people who are willing to help you succeed. And so when you get into the interview, you may have never done the job, but you can talk about that job and you can win. There are ways of bypassing that because job descriptions, we've already learned that they may be hit or miss, right? So don't worry about that. You need to be able to talk about success and how you're going to deliver value 100% of the time. And that's what you're really interested in looking at.
Absolutely, Brianna, I think you said perfect, because that was what I was going to actually jump in to say, is that, Christina, you want to move away from job boards and applications. You want to really reach out to people, so also people who share that job that, you're looking for, but also who's a level above, right? So connect with these people and become active in social circles, right? So, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's, I don't know what other job circles, or social places. So become active, share knowledge, share snippets of knowledge, golden nuggets, comment on other people's posts, really create a bit of a credibility and also a name for yourself, and really connect and, give yourself a target. I should like 5 posts from people in this area or in these organizations with these job titles. I should comment on at least 3. I should invite 10 on a weekly basis, write personal, invites. And really just start growing and start also creating start contributing also, your knowledge and your passion, and people will see that and pick it up, and will want that into their organizations.
Can I add one just from someone who normally is on the interviewing end, hiring agile coaches and scrum masters and other people into the organization. For Christina's perspective, interview the people that are interviewing you, right? So very recently, Sheetal met her at the last meetup. I actually hired an agile coach. Oh my God, it was, as we said, it was the best interview I've probably ever done, because she sort of sat there interviewing me by kind of like, well, why do you need this role? And, what's the outcome, the desired outcome of this person actually coming along? What are you looking for them to do within the organization? Etc. And I was just like, this is awesome. And the fact that that person interviewed me as much as I interviewed them, we could have literally sort of, left the office, gone down to the pub and continued over a glass of wine or something. It was that awesome. The other side is, though, I think, again, we're still not doing good enough, which led to one of the university questions we got on the board. A lot of us, whether we've come from a project management background, an analysis background, a software engineering background, something else, a quality assurance background, they're the roles which traditionally lead into becoming a Scrum Master. And the challenge is, we're not coming out of university or colleges or whatever with some qualification or some real true learning in the Agile philosophy, the mindset, how to behave in that new way in organizations. And so that's why we added our own question there about, are universities geared up for educating it? that's why I think they kind of go, well, so the majority of your career for the last 10 years, you've been a project manager. Okay, so now this is it. We need that project manager who's got the Scrum Master qualification. And it's still like, no, that's still the wrong way to do it. You're transitioning, you're going through some evolution, you're now working in a brand new way. Right, we need a Scrum Master. Let's hire for the Scrum Master. Let's make sure the job description is right for it. And that, again, we're working with the people management team to get that right, to hire you, so that, you know, you are the person we want to come into that organization to bring about change.
Thank you, Giles. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we get into, it's 7:25. I think we could potentially try and squeeze in one more question. Let's see. How do you go from years of team lead experience to becoming Agile coach? Are getting certificates important, necessary? So I guess this is a little bit of a continuation from what we're already discussing. So yeah, Rishita. Sorry. 5 minutes down for this one.
I have something to say about all certifications in general, to be honest. You know, I do find that considering we're in a world right now, which is increasingly, you know, divisive and inequitable, certifications, education are further separating, you know, the people and access. Do we really need certifications? Do we really need a degree? You know, and considering that we have, you know, from an organization perspective, you know, we say things like, you know, degree required for, you know, I don't know, call center work. Really, is that actually required? Or for factory working, is that really required? So, you know, is certification important, or is mindset really important? You know, is the framework that you bring with you, or the name tags that you bring with you, or is it really, you know, your you know, your knowledge, your passion, you know, your contribution, the value add? That's what's important. So and that's what I'm trying to sort of work towards, you know, in organizations that I work with, is to challenge this idea that we need certifications for roles, because is that really what's important? So this is because we've always done things in a certain way. We need, you know, the people needed to find a way to differentiate and distinguish, you know. It's also marketing, make money, you know, so we start inventing these things, you know, start to layering things, and we begin to exclude large parts of population, you know, because they don't have access to education, they don't have access to these master degrees or, you know, whatever, but they have the knowledge, they have the expertise, they have the, you know, the know-how, and that, you know, the ambition, and we stop it, you know, we basically draw a line. So do we need certifications? Unless you want to be a doctor, in which case, you know, is a certification that you need also, you know?
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you, Rishita. Giles, quickly? Yeah.
Well, no, Femi wanted to say something.
Sorry, go for it.
It's becoming extremely irritating and common for recruitment agencies twisting arms of organizations who are hiring to actually list a whole list. So many a times you see a requirement for a Scrum Master, you have to have an Agile coaching certification. You've got to have less, safe, Kanban qualification, and they list everything that they expect you to have less and safe in an organization that has maybe 2 Scrum teams. It's just becoming unacceptable.
You're right.
That's enough, I want to say.
No, you're right. And I do think it's the right thing for qualifications for personal learning, right? If you want to aspire to still keep learning, doing the stuff that Femi's obviously been doing, you know, especially where he talks about the CSM1, the 2, the 3, trying to get to that mastery of purpose sort of thing, that's great. That's your personal learning, how then you can then take what your knowledge is into the workplace. But should you actually be trying to go, right, well, when I hire my next CSM, by the way, that CSM, she's got to have CSM level 3. No, I mean, seriously, behave, you know, stop, cease and desist.
Yeah, agreed. And I think to add to that, you know, just my little 2 pence for it, is that at the end of the day, passion trumps certifications, I think. When you're really passionate about a certain subject matter, be that Agile or even cooking, it doesn't matter. You know, when you're passionate about it, you don't need to refer to a manual 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get that knowledge that you need. It will come just naturally to you. So, you know, if anything, I think that, you know, certifications are just a way of proving that I'm about to embark on this journey. It's just the start. What happens afterwards is a lot more important.
Something we touched upon earlier about how do we get into the role? Like, we've got 7.5 billion people on the face of the planet. When everybody's applying for the same job, there's got to be a minimum barrier, because HR is overwhelmed in trying to make decisions. Getting back to your informal network and networking with people, so when that role is made available, they know how to find you, is your best asset still. We recognize why those barriers keep going up, because there has to be, our mind can only handle so much capacity, right? And so when you've got 1,000 people applying for the same job, whether they have the credential or not, you know, it gets lost in the message. That's why you've always got to make sure that you are already connecting and reaching out to those people who are doing the hiring and who want to bring you on. You're prepared to bypass, you know, your lack of credentials or whatever the skill, or even if you don't have the skill that they were hiring for, that you can achieve that with them.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. It's now, it's a really irritating timer, sorry. This has been really interesting, everyone. Rishita, Giles, really inspiring, some really good takeaways. In fact, I can't record this video, download and upload this thing to YouTube, and it will be on YouTube very soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and I will see you all very soon. Giles, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now. Thank you.
Bye.